Okay, in this video we are going to continue our estate division problem, which is entitled Estate Division Part 2. Now, if you remember correctly, last time when we went over Part 1, we talked about the total value as well as the fair share. But in this video, we are going to be talking about how do you determine the actual winner of each item. How do you figure out the new cash balance? How do you figure out the bonus if there is one? And lastly, the final distribution. So let's go ahead and get started. If you remember correctly from our last video, we were dealing with John, Blake, Tom, and George, one of our two problems, and they had a car, boat, and a painting that they had to evenly divide among all four of them. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to pick it up from the fair share part of our problem here. So if you remember correctly, our fair share is right here. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to write all this information in this area here just to keep everything organized and not and nice and neat. So give me 1 second. Okay, so here we have everything written down here, kind of a little nicer and neater. So what we need to figure out now is going back to our title page is how each item was won by the heir. So let's go back to our problem here. And this is where you're actually going to look into the bids. So we're going to go into our table and we're going to figure out who exactly had the highest bid for each item. Well, if you notice for the car, remember all the car bids are written as a column format. Blake won the car. In our boat, John won the boat, and then in our painting, George won. Now, you might be asking, well, Tom didn't win anything. Well, that's okay, because sometimes you're going to have an heir that doesn't win anything, or you might deal with an heir that wins two items, if not all the items. Okay? So, moving back down to the fair share. And another way to look at the fair share is if every item was cashed out, this would be what everything or the amount of cash that each heir would get. Okay, because remember the fair share is based upon their estimation of what everything is worth plus the cash in the account. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and go back to what we were talking about. If you notice, John, he had the highest bid on the boat. So what we're going to do is we are going to take his fair share and we are going to subtract it by the cost of the boat. And then we're going to take Blake's fair share and we are going to subtract it by the cost of the car. Then notice Tom did not actually win anything, so we're going to just say subtract 0. And then George bought a $600 painting, and so we're going to subtract that from him. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my quick, simple subtraction problems to get the next step here. Okay, so I went ahead and fast forwarded a little bit, and I decided to go ahead and subtract what their fair share is from the item that they bought. And so what we have here are these numbers. These numbers here, 31,225. And basically what these numbers are is that is the amount of money that they are now going to get from the account. Okay, originally it was going to be this amount, but since we're dealing with an account with some items, basically that like $1,000 boat that John bid on, that's going to be $1,000 of his fair share. So we have just determined, going back to our original page here, this is the new cash balance. Okay, so that's where we're at right now, our new cash balance. So this is the amount of money that they're going to get paid. Okay, so this is the new amount of money that they're going to get paid. Okay, now the one thing to notice is that Blake is negative. He actually bought something that was more than his fair share. So what he's going to do is Blake is actually going to take this amount of cash and he is going to write a check to the bank account. And so what he's going to do is he is going to write a check and to the bank account, and the bank account is getting everything that Blake owes. So what happens here is now there's no longer $10,000 in the bank account. There's now $11,662 in the bank account. Okay. So now there's no longer 10,000, there's now 11,662. And so what happens with Blake is that Blake goes down to zero. Okay. He has paid his debt, he's now broke even. Now what you're going to do with this $11,662 is that this money will be the money that will pay off all the other heirs that still need to be paid off. Okay? So what you're going to do is you are going to take the $11,662, and I'll write this over here in red here, $11,662. You are going to subtract that amount from what John needs to get paid, $3,125, and you are going to subtract the amount that Tom needs to get paid, $3,837.50, and then you're going to subtract what George is, $2,987.50. Okay? And so what you're going to do is you're going to subtract that money and you're going to figure out how much cash is left in the bank account after paying off John, Tom, and George. And after doing this subtraction, we find out that there is $1,712 left in the bank account. This is what is left over after all the years have gotten paid. Okay? So this brings us into our next thing of how do you figure out the bonus? Okay. Now the bonus is very simple. If there's any cash left in the account, which there is, the fairest thing to do is to take this amount of cash left and just give it evenly to all the remaining heirs. And this includes Blake as well. Okay. So what's going to happen is we're going to get a bonus, or the heirs are going to get a bonus. So you're going to take the 1,712 and you're going to divide it by 4. And when you do that, you get $428. So this $428 is the bonus that was left over in the account. And everybody's going to get this bonus. So John got $3,125. He's also going to get $428 as a bonus. Blake's at 0. He's also going to get $428. Tom is also going to get $428, as well as George is also going to get $428. So they're all going to go ahead and get that additional cash along with their cash that they were owed. And so what's going to happen is we're going to have our last slide here, our final distribution. And our final distribution is going to be John ended up winning the boat. So this is the item that John won, because if you remember going back to our initial table here, John won the boat, Blake won the car, and then George won the painting. So moving down to my final distribution, Blake won the car, and I believe George won the painting. And if you remember, Tom did not win anything. Okay, so this is the item that each of them won, and the final cash balance is that, and what we're going to do is we're going to take for each item or for each heir the amount that they were paid plus the cash to get an overall total. So John ended up with $3,553 in his pocket. Blake ended up with just the bonus, which was $428. Tom ended up with $4,265.50, and George ended up with the painting in $3,415.50. Now, if I was to ask you a simple question of, okay, what was the total value of each of their inheritance? So the total value would be the cost of the boat, which was $1,000, and John ended up with $4,553. Blake ended up with a car for $6,000, which is $6,428. And Tom and George ended up with $4,265 and $4,015. If you have any questions, let me know for part 3. Thank you.